The year is 1347. A cold wind sweeps through the narrow streets of Messina, Sicily. The smell of salt from the harbor clings to the air, but something darker rides on the breeze, a faint, sour stench that no one can quite place. The townsfolk gather along the docks to welcome a fleet of 12 merchant ships returning from the distant shores of the Black Sea. Their sails are tattered, the wood of their hulls scarred by storms. The sailors do not wave. They do not speak. Many lie motionless on the decks, their skin marked with dark, swelling lumps. Rats skitter across the ropes, their fur patchy, their eyes glinting in the afternoon sun. When the city guards approach, they find the truth. Most of the crew are dead. The survivors are barely conscious, their bodies feverish, their breaths short and ragged. In the days that follow, the sickness spreads faster than any fire could. First to the docks, then the markets, then to every home, rich and poor alike. Messina will soon learn that what has arrived is not just another disease. It is the Black Death, a plague that will change the course of human history forever. This was not just a disease. It was a reset button for the world, wiping out half of Europe in less than 5 years and rewriting the rules of society, religion, and power. The origins of a nightmare. Long before it reached Europe's shores, the plague was already claiming lives in Asia. Historians trace its roots to the arid plains of Central Asia, where the bacterium Yersinia pestis thrived among rodent populations. Carried by fleas that fed on infected animals, the bacteria found a deadly pathway along the trade routes of the Silk Road. By the early 14th century, the Mongol Empire had connected distant civilizations in an unprecedented web of commerce. But with goods and ideas came something far deadlier: germs. Traders, soldiers, and travelers unknowingly became couriers for an invisible killer. One of the most infamous sparks came in 1346 at the Siege of Caffa, a Genoese trading port on the Crimean coast. When plague broke out among the Mongol forces besieging the city, they allegedly used one of the earliest forms of biological warfare, catapulting the corpses of their dead over the city walls. Whether truth or legend, the result was the same. Ships fleeing the siege carried the infection westward across the Mediterranean. The spread, Europe's fall. From Messina, the plague swept across Sicily, then Italy, France, Spain, and beyond. By 1348, it had reached England. By 1350, it was as far north as Scandinavia. No city, no village, no monastery was safe. The symptoms were terrifying. Buboes, large and painful swellings in the groin or armpits, turned black and oozed blood and pus. Fever and chills set in, followed by vomiting, diarrhea, and delirium. Most victims died within 3 to 5 days. The death toll was staggering. Historians estimate that between 75 and 200 million people died worldwide during the pandemic, with Europe losing between a third and half of its population. In some towns, there were not enough living to bury the dead. Life inside the chaos. Imagine walking through a medieval street. The air is heavy with the smell of decay. Windows are boarded shut. Priests carry wooden crosses, chanting prayers, while carts roll by carrying bodies piled like firewood. Families huddle indoors, terrified of a knock at the door from the plague doctor. And those doctors were a sight in themselves. Dressed in long leather coats, gloves, and boots, their faces hidden behind the infamous beaked masks. The beak was stuffed with herbs and flowers, thought to purify the air. In reality, it did little to stop the spread. The sight of such a figure in your street was often the last thing you ever saw. Trade collapsed. Food prices soared as fields went untended. In some areas, cats and dogs were killed en masse, believed to carry the disease. Ironically, this may have worsened the problem, since it allowed rat populations to grow unchecked. Human reaction: fear, faith, and fury. The plague did not just kill bodies, it broke minds. People searched desperately for meaning in the chaos. Many turned to religion, believing the plague was divine punishment for humanity's sins. Processions of flagellants roamed from town to town, whipping themselves in public as an act of penance. Others looked for scapegoats. In some cities, Jewish communities were falsely accused of poisoning wells, leading to massacres. Fear overruled reason. and hatred became another epidemic in the streets. There were also those who abandoned all restraint. Known as the plague revelers, they believed the end was near and sought to drink, feast, and indulge in every pleasure before death came knocking. One could say they invented the medieval version of YOLO. The aftermath. How the world changed by the early 1350s, the first great wave of the Black Death had burned itself out. But the world it left behind was not the same. Population collapse. With so many dead, labor became scarce. Serfs and peasants suddenly found themselves in higher demand. Many demanded better pay and living conditions. In England, this shift contributed to the eventual decline of the feudal system. Economic shockwaves. The scarcity of workers drove wages up, but also fueled inflation. Landowners, desperate to maintain profits, introduced harsh new laws to control labor. In some regions, this led to open revolt, such as the English Peasants' Revolt of 1381. Advances in medicine. Though medieval medicine was primitive, the sheer scale of the disaster forced societies to think differently about disease. Over time, public health measures, quarantines, and even the concept of isolation hospitals began to take root. Religious upheaval. The church, which had been the unshakable pillar of medieval life, suffered a blow to its authority. Its inability to protect the faithful or explain the plague in convincing terms left many disillusioned. This loss of trust helped sow the seeds for later movements like the Protestant Reformation. Cultural shifts. Art and literature took on darker themes, reflecting the trauma of the times. The motif of the danse macabre, or dance of death, became common, depicting skeletons leading people of all ranks into the grave. Life was seen as fragile, fleeting, and uncertain. The long shadow of the plague. The Black Death did not vanish entirely after the 1350s. Outbreaks continued for centuries, flaring up in cities across Europe and Asia. One of the worst resurgences struck London in 1665, killing 100,000 people in just over a year. The disease also shaped science in unexpected ways. The hunt for its cause and cure would eventually lead to major advances in microbiology centuries later. In the late 19th century, Swiss-French bacteriologist Alexandre Yersin identified Yersinia pestis as the culprit, finally solving a mystery that had haunted humanity for over 500 years. Why it still matters today. Modern medicine has made the plague treatable with antibiotics, but the lessons it left behind remain relevant. The Black Death taught humanity the importance of public health systems, the danger of misinformation, and the speed with which disease can cross borders. It also reminds us that pandemics are not just medical events. They are social, political, and cultural turning points. They change the way we live, work, and see the world. The story of the Black Death is not only one of unimaginable loss, it is also a story of transformation. Out of the ashes of medieval Europe rose a world that would eventually give birth to the Renaissance, the Age of Exploration, and the modern era. If you could step back into those streets of 1347, you would see fear etched into every face. You would smell the sickness in the air, hear the wails of the grieving, and feel the weight of death pressing down on the living. And yet, you would also see resilience. People found ways to survive, to rebuild, and to reshape the future. Perhaps that is the final legacy of the Black Death. It showed us that even in the darkest chapters of history, humanity can endure, adapt, and rise again. If you found this story as haunting and fascinating as we did, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and explore our next documentary. History has many more secrets to reveal. Thank you for watching, and see you on the next one.